Hi, LinkedIn friends. This is Lisa Hefford. I'm the founder and CEO of Simplicity Consulting based in Kirkland, Washington. We provide B2B marketing services that help brands accelerate their go-to-market marketing programs at speed and scale. And our mission here at Simplicity has always been to help everyone thrive in the new world of work. And that includes ongoing learning and development. So today, our focus is diversity, equity, and inclusion with a specific focus on anti-racism. You know, earlier this year, after the protests grew around our country against racial injustice in response to George Floyd's murder, I began thinking, you know, how could I be a part of the solution? What could I do in our role here, owning a company, and also with Simplicity? So we surveyed our consultants. We have over 150 consultants, and we asked them, you know, what do you want to see from us? How can we do better? How can we do more? And overwhelmingly, they told us they would like some learning and development from experts. They want to understand how they can do better, they can do more within their marketing and communications to incorporate a broader perspective around equity. So as a start, I reached out to my partner and colleague, Aiken Yassine, who runs the University of Washington Communication Leadership Program. And knowing that they work with communicators, I asked her, I said, hey, do you share the same vision and what can we do together? And can we collaborate? And we were completely on the same page, and I was super excited about our conversations. And then Aiken was instrumental in inviting Jody Ann Burry, a speaker, writer, and equity advocate who has joined us and created 3 amazing high-impact anti-racism learning series that you're going to learn more about today. So today is a conversation to share with you why we're doing this, what it's all about, and how you can participate, not only you, but with your teams. And really our goal is to really create anti-racism in workplaces. We are Simplicity is sponsoring these conversations. While we intended for these trainings to be for our employees, I recognized that this is a broader conversation. We need to do our part. So we are making these public. We're making these available to everybody for free. So go sign up. You're going to hear more about that. There's 3 different series to sign up for, and we want this to be as broad and really to have a global conversation. This is just the beginning of a lot more conversations to have, and we are so excited that you're here and you're participating with us. So now we're going to move on to meet our esteemed speakers and continue our conversation. Jody Ann Burry is a speaker, writer, and disruptor. Her professional mission is to create positive impact for diverse, marginalized groups through sustainable organizational development, program management, and capacity building. Aiken Yassine is the director of the University of Washington Communication Leadership Master's Program, which is a pioneer program in the world that equips students with tools to facilitate change, connection, and innovation in their organizations. I am so honored to be able to have this conversation with these 2 amazing thought leaders in this space. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn first to Aiken, and we're going to ask questions, and then we're going to turn to Jody Ann, and then we're going to wrap up. So let's first start with you, Aiken. So talk a little bit about why this series is important to University of Washington. What are some of your goals for this learning series, and really who is this for?
Yeah, I maybe I'll kind of shift the order of some of those questions. We are a master's program at University of Washington, one of the top public universities in the world. And our program is a very unique one. We actually embrace all aspects of communication as it's practiced by individuals who are across the spectrum of a variety of different professions, from nonprofit to profit to advocates to change makers in a variety of different definitional senses. So in that way, for us to kind of be a part of this conversation, to hear, to listen, and to contribute was very, very important for us. But the other reason why we're a part of this is the specific nature of this conversation. So as you'll see, and I know that Jody Ann might dive into this in a little bit, this is a very specifically curated series for communication and marketing professionals. Having said that, when we say communication and marketing professionals, it might sound niche. but it's actually a really interesting way to reach out to a very broad professional group globally and call them to action, again, globally. I can think of very few companies in the world, and those of us who are listening to us with any size of company that they're part of, I am sure they have some sort of a role, they may call it that or not, that is related to communication. Some sort of communication role is essential. During this crisis that we're experiencing globally right now, communication is at the core of it. Different people, no matter what type of entity it is, governmental, again, nonprofit or for-profit, has a communication at its core. So it is this foundational element of organizations. So we are kind of trying to target that in these conversations, right? So no matter where you are, what type of organization you're part of, as long as you're serving that role of facilitating some sort of communication internally or externally, you have to think about anti-racism. And let me get to why that matters too, because as communication is foundational in so many organizations, in the way in which we've built teams, in the way in which we talk about who we are, in the way in which we tell our stories about our organizations, again, no matter where we are, the same tool that we use that allows us to be alive as something in the world could also be the very same tool that we could use in a way where we intentionally or unintentionally cause harm in the world. I think we're very much realizing at this point now, very late, right, that there's a very, unfortunately, there's a spectrum between racism and anti-racism. My hope is that anti-racism is where we always start, and that there's not the racism part of it ever. However, currently, many of our practices actually sway between these two spectrums. How we communicate interpersonally at an organization with our teams hurt certain members of our team. We may, again, conscious, unconscious. I think it's mostly conscious, but there are, right, very many ways in which in our practices we are swaying in the spectrum. So my hope, personally, as someone who's trying to kind of lead a program where we, through our master's program, kind of start the conversation of what next generation practice of communication and marketing will look like. We'll want to kind of erase that spectrum and start from anti-racism and anti-racism only. And to be able to do so, of course, the second part, and my hope in doing so, is we learn what's missing. So programs like ours can teach it, and organizations like yours, Lisa, can offer workshops in it, and we can have collective conversations with Jodianne about what we should be reading, what we should be listening, so that we push that conversation. And last but not least, right, of course, we want to kind of create a new spectrum, but nothing in the world, as we live in a world in need of core sustainability, should be one-off anymore. Whatever we're doing, we should be committing to be doing it for the rest of our duration as an organization, as individuals, as whoever we are. So sustainability, which I think realizes itself in this spectrum, in this particular topic in anti-racism as accountability, is something else that we're going to have to figure out. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation to kind of give me inspiration as to how to, again, make anti-racism without racism a reality in our program for our community, and then also understand how to make it as sustainable a model as possible. So change our system at the same time. Ambitious, but I'm very, very hopeful because of this really bright group.
Absolutely. That was fantastic. It's, it's that reminder that words matter, right? The words we say really matter. And in this moment where it feels like the world is speeding up to some degree, it's important for us to, pause. And maybe this pandemic has caused many of us to pause and really think about those words we're saying. You're right. And how it's evolving, how is the global communication, which moves so quickly through social networks now, how those words are really impacting people. And you're right, they're for good. They could be used for good or for bad. So let's keep focusing on how do we evolve for good. I love all of that. And so now we're going to shift to Jodianne. I'm going to give a quick overview on the learning series that Jody Ann has masterfully created. The first one's called Navigating Racial Microaggressions at Work. By the way, I've already gotten so much feedback that this is the hot topic for anyone, right? Microaggressions. That was actually, for me, a new term. I'm kind of embarrassed to say, I think, until now, and learning more about it. So if you're in that boat, join that amazing session. The second one is Building Anti-Racist Practices in Recruitment, Hiring, and Retention. I cannot wait for this one. This is what we do all day long. This is what every company does. How do you recruit? How do you make sure not only you're recruiting in a way that's really bringing people in an equitable way, but then when they're in your organization, right? How do you ensure they're successful? And the final one, which is really amazing for this community, is building an anti-racist toolkit in marketing and communication. So this one is a must for any marketing and communication professional out there. We're going to be specifically talking about action items and key takeaways for you. So I'm just so excited to sit back and learn from Jody Ann, and she's bringing in some amazing partners as well to have in these conversations. So Jody Ann, share a little bit about your story, how you became a disruptor, and also what are the participants going to learn? What do you hope they learn? How can they really use these opportunities in a more of a learning environment within their teams and organizations?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. I will say, speaking of communications, I keep forgetting I have a BA in communications. That's actually where I started my learning. And so it feels good to be back with my community in this work. And as we talk about language, I became a disruptor because throughout my academic and professional life, I don't think there's been a classroom or a job team or a meeting where someone did not call me disruptive. In a pejorative sense. And like terms are too aggressive, too assertive, and all these ways that we try to temper the voices of women of color, particularly Black women in the workplace. And so as I thought about that language, I said, you know what? So what if I'm disruptive? Isn't that what we're supposed to be? You know, in some spaces, we talk about disruptive leadership in terms of tech leaders and all these folks that are really trying to champion new ways of being, new ways of thinking. Am I not doing the same thing? And so then appropriating that language that was used against me to silence me is actually the avenue that I use to speak up. And so when I was laid off during the COVID-19 period, along with 50 million other people in this country, I said, you know what? I got a Zoom, I have Eventbrite, I have a platform. Let me use it to talk about the things that I want to talk about. Let me be disruptive in the way that I've been reprimanded for, and use that as a vehicle to connect, other folks of color or other folks in allyship with racial justice, with conversations, community, and spaces to engage with the type of language, the types of topics and learning and actions that can move us forward. And so I'm so excited that our partnership with the University of Washington, the Communications Leadership Department, as well as Simplicity Consulting, to continue to think about this work in a more nuanced way and create space for, current and future industry professionals to really engage with anti-racism in a way that feels applicable, actionable, and relevant to the work that you do every single day and the decisions that you make.
Absolutely.
And so, as I think about, I know that was a lot. I was just like, oh, okay.
Take a breath.
Second part of the question, what can participants learn? And so I want to speak to the whole series, right? It is called Transforming Silence to Action, which is inspired by Audre Lorde's essay, which we've linked to in the Eventbrite. But, since George Floyd's murder, the leadership of Black and Brown activists and community members across all identities have really ushered in this really serious reckoning with how racism and white supremacy impacts our lives, not just in the police systems, but all aspects of our society. And so in this reckoning, since this unfortunate, senseless, and tragic act, many individuals and companies are catalyzed to not just know more, but to do more. And so the overall focus of the series is just that, right? Sharing knowledge and sharing tactics to help us transform our values, our hopes, and all the ways that we are in silent alignment with this work into actual changes that we can make today to ensure that racial equity is possible in our lifetimes. We all have a sphere of influence and control in our professional lives, regardless of where we are in our organizations and our leadership. And so we are all in our personal and professional lives making these small or medium or big decisions that could really make an impact, right? If we do this work through a racial equity lens. And so this series, the Anti-Racism Learning Series, is to help bring together, again, a community of current and future industry professionals and leaders to learn and ideate together on actions that can help make that possible. And so each session is designed to hit different aspects of that work. And so the first session, like you said, is about workplace racial microaggressions. And microaggressions, even though that's new to some people, and Lisa, thank you so much for sharing, where you are in your learning journey, because we're all in different places. But even I, in doing this work, learned that this term microaggressions has been around for at least 50 years. 50 years. And so microaggressions, they speak to the slights and the indignities that people of color experience day to day. And I want to talk about how they show up in our interpersonal relationships with our colleagues and our clients, as well as how the actual work of marketing and communications can create environmental microaggressions. I'm from New York City, and I can't tell you how many times I've been on a subway platform looking at a magazine rack and not seeing a single person of color on the cover. That is microaggressive, right? And now that's changing because everyone's, putting Black people on covers, but that's an aside. Anyway, so in this session, I will be leading that conversation around racial microaggressions in the workplace, interpersonally, but also in our work products. And so as we think about these interpersonal interactions with our colleagues and our clients, that means we also have to start thinking about our network. And so a lot of that is controlled by how we develop our talent pipelines. And so we have 3 incredibly talented speakers for this session. I'm so excited because I've been a big fan of these women for a really, really long time. But they will speak to the recruitment process, hiring, and retention opportunities and tactics that can help people of color thrive in their careers at companies and organizations that have strong cultures around equity and belonging. And so as we look to bring in these anti-racist practices in recruitment, hiring, and retention, we also need to think about bringing an anti-racism lens to the actual work, the things that we're doing together in marketing and communications. And so these practices, they don't change based on who's in the room, right? They need to change the actual work. And so our speakers for this session will focus on designing for equity, leveraging, even performative anti-racism for actual real change, and talk about other tools to help attendees think differently about their work. And so when I think about this series, yes, take it a la carte, come to some, come to all. But I think the best way to engage with these sessions is to ensure that your whole team can log in. These are the conversations that, change can't just live in 3 90-minute sessions. That's not how that's going to happen. And one person from your team can't attend and then bring back the lessons. I just want you to imagine the power of your entire team joining and then conversing together separately from those meetings, maybe even right after, to reflect on what you learned and start planning, do work, right? Start planning how these changes can actually materialize in the decisions that you make tomorrow, today, right? Where do you want to go with your anti-racist practices as a team or as an organization? And what is the strategy that's going to take you there? And so that is the big ask for these sessions, for those who participate, and my goals and our collective goals on what people take away.
That's awesome. I'm just so excited. I cannot wait to just be a student and listen and learn. And even I'm just sitting here listening to the wheels are turning, right? Because And no matter what position anyone's in, and I love that you said that, Jody, and each of us have the power to impact change, no matter what your position and what your role. And so to think about wherever you are right now, I'm thinking a lot about that for my organization. What does diversity and inclusion mean? What does racial equity mean for us? What does that mean beyond maybe just a goal or a quota? You know, I think it's a much broader discussion. Just so excited to learn more about. So as we move into closing our awesome conversation here, and if you haven't already, you've probably seen the Eventbrite link in the drop down. So go sign up. That's definitely one of the action. You know, our goal, as we've said, really is to drive a global conversation, to educate a global audience, and to really be a stronger community through actionable and anti-racism in the workplace. So this is really just the beginning, as we keep saying, and we're just so excited to bring this and learn. And I think once we do this, we're all going to learn what's the next step, right? This is a step by step. This isn't over. This is going to be an ongoing process, and I'm excited to see what comes after this. So in closing, I'll just ask each of you to share your call to action. Jody Ann, I think you said yours. Why don't you reinforce it for the audience?
Yeah, my call to action is to rally your team. Rally your colleagues, have a dedicated time when you're going to join these meetings together. And then afterwards, maybe even 5 minutes afterwards, take a quick bio break and schedule time to reflect together on what you learned and how you want to move forward. Also, come prepared with, I keep notepads around me. I know it's 2020, but I keep those around me. Have a separate tab open, but I want you to be actively engaged in taking notes and really thinking about what the speakers are saying and how you want to map that onto your own learning. And so maybe even coming with some questions, some ways that you want to guide your own learning, see what fits in, and then you can present those questions to our speakers.
I love that. Those are great action items. How about you, AK? What's your call to action?
Well, I just want to invite all prospective, so future practitioners again. I think you should not shy away that this is your future profession, because as Jody Ann mentioned and Lisa also touched upon this, we hope that these sentiments, these actions are foundational. And one of the best ways to make it foundational, actually, is to think about them before you start your actual practice. So you're a key candidate, although it's all open to all. So that's one thing that I want to say is, even if you're aspiring for a future in this profession, this is the space to start in globally, right? I mean, and again, we experience racism all around the world in different ways. And we, again, have communication marketing practices all around the world and across the nation as well. So I really want to encourage those of you who are early on in your career, who are kind of getting ready for this career, to participate in this conversation as well. My second bit is just to also understanding the landscape. We were saying communication and marketing professionals, but communication is a really interesting term. It includes a lot of different professions. In our program, I just want to community builders, right? Community managers, HR managers, even those of you who are working in user experience. Your work is all about communication, content strategy. We may be calling it communication and marketing as a broad blanket term, but communication under its broad umbrella actually unites us all together. So I would encourage all of those of you who may not have this traditional 2 words in your title, but do communication related work, to join us as well, to kind of set the tone and to understand what's next, to ensure that anti-racism is where we start from for all of us.
I love that. I'm so glad you said that about the roles, because even as a leader, you think about people in leadership roles, CEOs, VPs, they're communicating all day long. They have tremendous influence. And so really thinking about that, these conversations really are for so many different people with different titles. So thank you so much for making that point. So my call to action is definitely just sign up. Go to the Eventbrite link. You can choose your own adventure. You can choose what looks interesting to you. You can choose all of them. Bring along your colleagues, your friends, your work team. Create this. Use this as a launching pad for your own learning and development. So I really want to thank both of you, Jody Ann and Aiken, for taking this time. And I know how much time you've already invested in energy into making this series amazing. So I'm just, thank you so much. I think on behalf of the LinkedIn community for really bringing this to the world. And in closing, it takes all of us to make the change we want to see in the world. So thank you for joining us to help transform silence into action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. See you Tuesday.
Yeah. See you next week. Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.